The seventh pitfall of masculine practice is that separateness is the opposite of intimacy. And this ties up to essentially everything I've said up to this point, right? If you don't feel free, it's because there's a self in the way. And that self is generated at the root level from the experience you had in this meditation we just did. Where when you rest as the witness, observing your breath, or observing the pain in your back, or observing your intimate partner, there is this sense of you, and there's this sense of otherness. Right? That separation in and of itself is the opposite of intimacy. We can't create intimacy from there, and that's a paradox, because in masculine practice and polarity work, we're always intentionally exaggerating the difference between these two poles, between masculine and feminine. Resting as consciousness, embodying consciousness, breathing as consciousness, right? While our intimate partner moves as light, as form, as sound, as all of its ups and downs, right? And that difference creates this sexual charge. But if we just chronically live in that difference, if that was the goal, you would just constantly feel at odds with the other. Everything's fiery, but everything burns. Everything is conflict in that fire. Conflict, indifference with no resolve, no real intimacy. And I just want to describe a very practical moment from my own life where this came up in a very subtle way. My wife and daughter and I went to the ballet just last weekend. It's my first time at a ballet, at a real ballet anyway. My sister growing up was way into ballet, and I was forced to go to her ballet performances when I was younger. And man, I hated it. It was the worst. So I had a long history in childhood of despising these things. So I haven't been to one of these things in, like 25 years. So I went, and I sat down, and as I sat down, the dancers get on the stage, and I immediately watched my mind start judging the experience. There was something about like the outfits or something, right? I didn't like what I was seeing. Some judgment just came up in my mind about what I was seeing. And I immediately noticed misery. I was just like, oh, there's that misery, like of, oh, I don't want to be here. Oh, this is going to be painful. Oh, I will certainly not enjoy this. Like that whole feeling starts to come over me. But what I did in this moment is I noticed my mind doing that. And I experienced this separation between myself and what I was actually watching. And because of the practices and trainings that I've done over the years, I'm not only able to observe that, but I was able to turn that mechanism off such that my mind stopped judging. I was able to silence the judge. And I was able to just observe purely at what was going on with no inner story or inner narrative about what I was watching or what it was. And then suddenly now I'm just experiencing ballet. There's just ballet. And there's sensations in my body, and my mind is not making any judgments or labeling about what the experience is. And suddenly I find myself in a deep meditative trance. A deep meditative trance, which then carried on throughout the entirety of the ballet, which surprised me. I didn't know that was going to happen. It ended up being not just an incredible experience, but a deeply spiritual, insightful one. Incredibly pleasant. That would not have been my experience if the judge mechanism was allowed to control the moment and kept going. So this is what I mean by the judge. This is what I mean by the masculine eyes of judgment. And what I mean by separation is the opposite of intimacy. Because think about every time you're doing that with your intimate partner. Think about every time you do that with your intimate partner. The practice we're developing here is the capacity to turn that off. Let something more intelligent come online. Consciousness itself, conscious love itself.